All right. Well, welcome everyone to Next Level. Every week I get to bring somebody on that is somebody that I've met either recently or a long time ago. Today is I get to bring somebody on that I met recently. If you guys aren't familiar with Clubhouse, which is a platform that is used for social media and used for really just some really great conversations. Um, Clubhouse is really cool. If you need an invite, let me know. I've been on maybe 3 weeks and I've just met some amazing people. And the other night I was on and I was listening to this guy and I thought, I love his background. I was reading his bio and I was just really intrigued by his peak performance, his ability to really get to the root of helping people excel and achieve more, even more than they're already achieving. And so I reached out to him and I said, yeah, I'd really like to just kind of set up a time with you. And he said yes. And unbeknownst to me at the time, he was in Ireland, so I didn't realize that we were going to have such a time gap. But it was really cool that he did it. So, Dr. Hogan, thanks for being on the call today.
Delighted to be here and asked. Thank you so much, Bob.
Yeah, thank you. It's I was reading your background and reading some of the things you've done and the books and all this other stuff. But what really transcends everything, I think, when we see what somebody's done is who they are. And so one of the next level pillars I teach is who you are is more important than what you do, because who you are will determine the quality of anything and everything that you do. And as I was reading yours, I was like, man, there's all these accomplishments, but there was this sense of real humility in the accomplishments that you've had, but also this what I sensed was this inquisitiveness about you, that you really are inquisitive and you ask really good questions, obviously, because you get to the root of why somebody is underperforming or how someone can perform even better. What do you think are some of the key attributes that have allowed you to do that?
Gosh, first off, that's a big introduction. I don't know if I can live up to it. Oh gosh, I just think everybody's different, and I suppose when you speak about inquisitiveness, we all have our natural curiosity. And when we're children, and I spent a lot of years teaching, every child is different, and it's just a matter of figuring out what it is that they're curious about at that moment and then capturing their attention and then going with that flow. Now, as we know, when we're children, when we're growing up, we're all kind of wandering along and growing up and developing and seeing different things, going different places. And so our curiosity changes, and then we become adults and we kind of get into this 9 to 5, into this kind of rut. And in the Western world, we fall into this kind of general rat race, don't we?
Yeah.
And this was pre-COVID, of course.
Right.
And so a lot of people become streamlined, I think, with I need to pay this rent, obviously, once a month or whatever, or I need to pay my mortgage once a month, and I need to therefore go to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, 40 hours a week, 4 weeks or 5 weeks a month. And so that's very predictable.
Yeah.
But what's unpredictable is our thoughts. And it's like, what are our thoughts and where they're coming from? And the best feed of our thoughts are coming from childhood. And I know there's a huge proliferation of social media and all different kind of education out there. And as we saw in 2020 with the news and fake news and wherever the media is coming from, these can jumble up our thoughts. But behind it all is our ability to be curious and our natural confidence. I don't believe people lack confidence. I believe they have a natural confidence, but it's aligned with their ability. So it's a matter of figuring out what your ability is, and then that's where the confidence lies, and then going with that, I think.
Wow. I think I love the statement that our confidence is maybe an even proportion to the level of our abilities, right? Is what you were saying. I love that idea. So how do you suggest that someone get more confidence if they don't have the ability in something and they're trying to learn something new? Obviously, their confidence is going to be tied to their lack of knowledge at that point.
Yeah.
So how do you encourage them to get over that fear of trying something that they're not confident about yet so that they can gain the confidence?
Yeah, it's a big thing. Confidence is a big thing, isn't it? In everything. And like yourself, when you listen to on Clubhouse, there's so many incredible people, so many top class business people, people that have millions and billions, and marketeers and athletes and Olympians and every type of person. that has achieved, and all ordinary 9 to 5 people, which is wonderful. It's a mixed bag of everybody, and people can communicate and ask questions and so on. And the beautiful thing about that is that there's an interaction, but even the top class people that we hear on there all have lacks of confidence when they're honest. If you get into a personal conversation, or even if you're just sitting back and listening, you'll hear when they speak about certain aspects of life, or if they're asked a general question. And if there's a big room like there is in there, you can kind of, you have to answer the general question. If you're, say, for example, on the stage, it's often put to like 10 or 20 or 30 people on the stage. And so if they're all from different walks and backgrounds, there's always somebody there with a lack of confidence in some regard. I believe that nobody in this world has full confidence all of the time. And so we all have anxieties, even if we don't realize it or not. Obviously, with 2020 and the pandemic and that, it would have heightened anxiety in a lot of people. And that's normal, that's natural. Something we're not aware of comes, and we don't have information, and we rely on so much information. Even the best educated people did not know, because it was something new. But when we're trying to learn a new skill, or trying to do something new, that's exciting, and that breeds, like you said earlier on, the curiosity. So you're like, oh, I'm curious about that, I could be passionate about that. But then you try and you're like, I can't do it, I just can't get it. It's like playing golf or playing a sport or something like that, social. But that doesn't mean to say that you don't have some sort of ability there. You just have to harness it. And I think the fears are coming a lot from our internal past and what we've done other things with. So if we failed in the past at another sport, for example, or a performance, or, as we know, psychologically, could go back to when you're 6 or 8 years of age, going on stage when you're younger. You might even remember it, like a repressed memory, but there's something in there. But also the language, like we often say, you should have confidence, or you deserve confidence. But that's saying to them, I believe you do not have it. You can get confidence, but that's saying I don't have it. So why am I stripping them of it, if no matter how well I feel about them or how much I want them to have it, if my language is like that? So it's really important to kind of look at the language as well behind it.
Do you think that people should celebrate, even if they have a little confidence in an area, that they should celebrate that, to cultivate that? I mean, I find, that, sometimes, in the US, we give awards for people just for trying, type of thing. And I'm not a huge fan of that with kids, but I see the validity in some areas. But I think there's this element that we have to learn how to celebrate that we took one step before we take the second step, so that we have momentum to take that second step. Do you agree with that? I mean, and what can you say to help us do that more effectively?
Yeah, I totally agree with first part of your question there, with regard to kind of this, medals and ribbons for participation. Uh, that's, I don't think, a good thing. I do believe, though, like you said in the second part of the question, with regard to celebrating what I've attained. But the thing is, it's like, well, how can you celebrate without actually getting a ribbon or getting something just for participating? The difference there lies in, if you're, say, for example, a child or a young person coming along and you're just participating in something and people are insisting that you have some sort of prize for it, I think that's a public declaration that you're good enough to actually just turn up on a Saturday morning. When in reality, if you're an adult who's 25 and you've played sport, or you've performed on stage, or gone through different rounds of performance in music or acting or whatever it is, when you get out to the real world, as we all know as adults, you don't get participatory ribbons or medals. You get, in fact, if you don't lose enough, if you don't suffer hardship or adversity away, you're going to take that disappointment very, very hard. And so you'll be so disappointed you won't learn. So I think we need to celebrate personally and clap yourselves on the back personally, because this past year has been a tough year for everybody. I do not know your life. And even if I was living in the same house as you in the last year, I would not know exactly how you're feeling with regard to what you had in your head or perceived you wanted to do back at the start of 2020 in your normal plans of life or business or whatever. So maybe you hadn't written it down. Maybe you hadn't even said to people that in March or April or May you're going to go some such place or do a thing you've never done before or challenge yourself. So I don't know how that makes you feel then a year later. And so the personal things need to be, the personal accomplishments need to be kept within, but you need to celebrate it within your own mind and have good self-talk with regard to that. And I think that's what we should be teaching children more so than actually saying, hey, everything's a celebration publicly, because what does the winner feel like then after that? Or what do you feel like if you don't win when you're older? So I think there's a lack of balance there that we need to address.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so many people that just want to not make anyone feel bad, that they're willing to, they're willing to compromise or settle for something less than. And for me, when we start talking about this, I immediately start thinking about, well, what are the people that are struggling right now because they had plans, they made a plan, it didn't come together. One of the pillars I teach is that unfulfilled expectations lead to anger, bitterness, resentment, frustration, and overwhelm. And it's that unfulfilled expectation. So people who expected to have something by this time in life, something by this time of the year, something by whatever, what do you say to them about getting over that or working through that? Because if they don't work through it, it's going to just repeat itself and constantly haunt them, in my opinion. So, what do you say to them, and how do they work through that disappointment?
Well, yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, this past year, again, we're living mostly in a rat race. This past year, it's the complete opposite. It's the rats that are taking over the cities because they feel like they can come into the cities where they would have owned originally anyway, and all the foxes and all the nature, which is wonderful. But then we feel ourselves that if we're an achiever, if we kind of push ourselves all the time and we have already achieved or we performed well or we set ourselves goals and we can't attain them, that's a huge downer.
Mm.
But the reality is, if you look further down the line, 10, 20, 30 years at what you want to attain in life, what can you do with everything? Like, what can you do with all the medals or all the money out there? You can just stop and go, well, hey, like, I'm on my own, unless I use this money for good or bad.
Mm.
If you use it for bad, it's going to be squandered, isn't it? Muhammad Ali said a great thing one time about something to the effects of, it's all only dust. So when he was asked about how famous he was and how many titles he had won and all of that, and he was like proclaimed the greatest athlete in the 21st century, and he said, it's all only dust. And that was when he was older in years, because it's gone. When something's gone, it's gone. I think after 2020 or even during it, naturally there's two types of people, really. There's two ways of looking at it back then. Was it's like, well, I can try and achieve right now, but I mean, the goalposts have moved. The whole thing has moved. Everything is inconsistent. So my goals, my aspirations, my hopes, they're put on ice. So a lot of people would have sat down, watched a lot of Netflix or watched, things on TV or watched the news and done things essentially and not gone to bed on time or eaten the wrong diet or whatever. And those people will be giving themselves habits for perhaps the next phase of their lives that are not so good. And that kind of, this word mindset, this kind of thinking of, well, you know, 2020 is a write off. I've heard that. We've all heard that. We've seen that.
Right.
But then there's the other type of decision making in your mind. And you might say, well, okay, let's pause. I can't do that. I can't do that. And I can't do that. These are the hopes and dreams I had and the plans I had. But don't say they're gone. We don't know if they're gone or not, but just put them on ice and think, right, where can I turn and use that energy? Because that's all it is at the end of the day. It's energy. And we need to refocus. Like, again, in a sporting way, if the game ends level, what do? You need to replay. So you need to reframe your mind for the next week or the next month or whenever you're playing again. It wasn't your plan.
Right.
You go through your mind that you're either going to win or lose. It's the same way with going up on stage or doing a speech or going into work for a pressurable promotion or interview or something like that. You never expect the middle ground. But when it happens, you must reframe. And so it's a matter of realizing, and I think the brilliant thing about this past year is that we are all in this together. And that's another phrase that has come out many times, but it's so true, because the more we use the channels and click over and back on the television stations, we realize that it's in every continent at different times. And so the people that are rushing ahead in business or in aspects of life that you want to kind of compete in or get ahead in, more than likely, it's only a false kind of going ahead. It'll stop at times.
Mm.
And like losing in anything in life, you learn the most about yourself. And it's only you that can control things when the chips are down in the future. And you learn the most when things are down. So I would take 2020, 21, and so on into, well, how can I look into myself? What quirks or what ways can I improve? Even if I'm an achiever, even if I want to perform more so, there's always something I can get better at.
Mm. Yeah. Yesterday I was sitting there watching a contestant show like American Idol or something like that, and I was watching it, and I remember getting really vulnerable. I remember thinking something about a particular person's performance and not being. I was like, "Wow, that was not good. That was terrible. That was." And I just kind of remember making this comment inside, not externally. And I remember thinking, and then I heard her story about what she had gone through, and I was like, the fact that she's even on that stage, opening herself to the ridicule, is beyond impressive. And I remember writing down. I wrote down in my notes. I said, the real measure of a person isn't based on what they think; it's what they do with that thought. Right? We know that to be true, but I remember thinking, how can I improve based on what I just experienced about myself? And am I looking to improve myself at all times? And if so, then I'm in the right position. Even if I had a negative thought for that second about that person's performance, it came back around. And so I think that a lot of times right now is we're struggling with this identity of who we are based on who we thought we were going to be by this given time in our life or year or whatever else. What do you say to address to somebody's identity? How do they achieve greater performance when their identity is maybe skewed at a given moment?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. A brilliant way of looking at it is, I think, biologically, because
Mm.
my nails grow on my fingers, my hair grows on my head, no matter who I am, at some rate. So it's a case of I have to cut those nails or, trim my hair. It's the same way though for your skin. Your skin cells kind of change over time. And sometimes, for example, if we had a lump, God forbid, or some sort of skin adhesion, the color or the shape can slightly change. It might be harmless, but it can change, and it can be there for 10 years and it can change. So everything changes within us. But if we keep our mind in a negative fashion, or if we keep repeating this humdrum, being put into this kind of 9 to 5 routine that is just paying the bills or just so, well, then we're never going to change. What is change? Change is growth. So if we look at our identity is only what I am right now. I identify as whatever. That's really truly what it is. However, I've always been born in such and such a place. I can't change that. Fine. I went to school in such and such a place, or I worked in such and such a place. Fine. But that's the past.
Mm.
So my future is what I will identify in the future with. So if I want to be a fantastic something, X, Y, and Z, I can try to be that. Now, okay, of course, I need to have ability to be, we're not all going to be NBA 7 foot tall players or whatever, but we have to use, well, what is it about, say, for example, basketball or NBA or fame or fortune or whatever it is that I want to perform at that really, really attracts me? And, if I can't realize that my legs or my body are a certain shape and there's a limitation on them, well, then there's something wrong with me, right? That's the truth. Because I mean, you're living in your own body for so long. If you're a singer and you want to be, like you say, on American Idol or one of these top shows, or you want to be in a top band, realistically, you have to get objective advice. You can't just be, waiting for somebody to listen to you in the shower and think you're fantastic, like your brother, your father, your mother, your partner, whatever.
Right.
So we just have to kind of look at, we can change, but look at our ability, and you can identify with something in the future. So if it's sport or music, you can identify with, okay, maybe I'm not going to be on stage, but I can be the roadie.
Hmm.
I can be in that realm. I love music. I love what's happening in music. I can be the coach. Maybe I'm not the best coach. Okay, well then I can be the cameraman for sport or whatever.
Hmm.
So you have to look at your abilities,
Yeah.
but then your identity, like if you love something, it's a passion, it's drawing you towards it. Especially if you love something from childhood, it's not going to go away.
Hmm.
So even if you're middle-aged or getting on in time, never say never, you know. You can do that. And I mean, that's the beauty of, like, we're having a conversation right now. You reached out to me. I was delighted to do it. We're having a conversation. We're bringing around new thinking. So if everything changes in my body, skin cells, everything over time, well, therefore, my mind can change. It's just how I change it. I identify as this or I identify as that. But again, be realistic. You know, we have to have this thing called common sense, which isn't so common anymore. We have to look at ourselves in the mirror too and realize what we are good at and what we're not. But again, if you want to go down the road and think you're 7 foot tall and you're a basketballer with the NBA and you're not, that's fine. You can identify as that, but people will know you're not. So
Right.
it's up to you.
Yeah, I think that's so funny and so true about having that person, like you said, your mother, your father, whoever that can
Yeah.
speak truth to you. But surrounding ourselves, because sometimes even our family isn't the best person to tell us the truth because they only know us as a child, type of thing. But so, what do you say to this idea of imposter syndrome? Because there's this whole thing, that people talk about, well, just fake it till you make it type of thing, and all of this. And I'm not a big proponent of that, but again, I understand why people say that. But what do you think about the person who's like feeling like, well, okay, everyone thinks I'm doing better than I am, or everyone thinks that I'm smarter than I am, or everyone thinks that blank, fill in the blank. What do you tell that person who's suffering that imposter syndrome? Because I think we all have suffered it. I mean, I've worked with top athletes to celebrities to everything, and I've seen imposter syndrome in every element of life at one point or another. What do you say to that person who's like, everyone thinks I'm doing really well right now, and I don't think I really am doing as well as they think I am, and it's just a matter of time before I get found out, type of thing. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I think it's a big conversation that we've both heard of lately, and I think it's a wonderful conversation because when we look at people that, again, if I think a certain thing about myself for my job or whatever, and then others are reflecting in a different way towards me, I'm like, well, hang on a second, did I put that out there, or did they come to me towards it, or whatever? So
Yeah.
you're always kind of asking those questions, but it's brilliant when people lay the cards on the table and say, I really feel this way about it, or, I only made my first million last year, even though I have like 200 million right now or something.
Right.
So I think it's a stretch in your mind. Again, going back to that ability bit like I spoke about there, there's no point, like, you have to be rational about things and go, hey, am I a certain height? Am I a certain weight? Have I a certain ability? Does my voice sound objectively good away from my family by voice experts or musical experts that know that? So, right, I need to develop that voice. I need to do the training in my body or whatever. So once I do that, I now realize that in 4 years' time, I can be in the Olympics. I can compete. Will I win? I don't know. The gun can go off and I could have a false start. But all I know is that when I do my training, that I can reach a certain level most of the time. I can reach the certain times at a certain time or most of the time. So it's like, how much can I stretch my mind towards 4 years' time, say, for example, in the Olympics? Well, I can look at the calendar and I can break it down incrementally, step by step, do my training every day. Or again, if you're singing or if you're learning your lines as an actor, how can I do, 3 days on set and do 1 hour broken up into 20 different scenes as an actor? How can I do that? That's tough. I was never good at learning in school, but I know I can act dramatically. So it's incremental and it's practice like everything, but you have to have the ability. So if you stretch it in your mind, that's the fake it till you make it bit for sure. And yeah, but it's like casting out, I think, a fisherman or woman casting out into the ocean. They're faking till they make it. They're waiting for the fish. They don't have any fish.
Mm.
But everybody walking by and seeing them on the on the on the river or whatever, or on the water side, they're kind of looking and they're saying, well, that person is a fisherman or a fisherwoman because they've got the gear and they've got the rod and they're waiting. And if they come back a few hours later and they're still waiting, they'll still think they're a fisherman or woman because they mightn't have the fish,
Mm.
but they're trying, aren't they?
Mm.
They've got the gear, they've got a certain amount of knowledge, so you just presume.
Mm.
So, as you know, it's a perception. But if you put out that perception, I mean, if you really want to fool people, for example, you got to know your stuff. And to know your stuff, you got to study and you got to do your research. And so if you're doing that, well, you may as well qualify at it, or you may as well become that great singer, or you may as well be that great athlete or whatever it is. So if you stretch yourself, if you look at your mind and say, well, in 10 days' time, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, or in 5 years' time, or whatever, but it has to be realistically based too. Now, if you get, and that's why I think it's brilliant where people that are high achievers, they're at the top of their game in whatever aspect of life, but they have to go, hang on a second, I need somebody else. I'll bring them in here to be accountable to my actions and my thoughts, because we always need somebody to check us out. And that's where, and a lot of the experts out there that come in and do things like that, they might have huge experience and huge talent, but it might be quite simplistic for them to actually work with a really complex person because they can see that one thing that we all habitually do wrong all of the time. Because we're only human. None of us are perfect. We're always learning. People often ask me about my education or whatever. And I think, it's funny because, I mean, once you do a degree or something like that, you get your certificate, you put it on the wall if you want to do that, but then the knowledge is old. So the knowledge nowadays is flying all around the place. Anybody can have as much knowledge as me. It's just what I do with it, how I allow it to change the way I think or challenge the way I think or have thought beforehand. And so curiosity comes into it. And that was your earlier question as well, I think. Again, why would you begin to fake it till you make it if you weren't curious in the first place? And curiosity it's a positive thing. Again, going back to when you're a child, you're in a car, for example, and you're riding along, looking out the window. You don't know what's happening outside, but you're curious by what you see. And so it's all of those kind of things you learn when you grow up, those experiences and interactions with people that make you curious about life. And you think, I could be interested in that. And just because you haven't achieved in school or haven't achieved in sport or on the stage or whatever, again, it doesn't mean to say you can't do it. You can have ability. We look at, I'm in Ireland, there's an Irish woman a few years ago, I don't know if you remember her, Mary Byrne was her name, and she was an overweight housewife who had worked in the local store. And she just went on one of those programs for celebrity, tryouts or whatever. And she just absolutely,
Amazing.
absolutely amazing. She had this powerful voice. And from then on, she became a superstar. And she was literally, I think, nearly 50 years of age, single woman, worked, I think it was part-time in a shop, and had no education, came from a fairly rough part of Dublin in the capital of Ireland. But she was a very positive, outgoing person towards everyone else. But inside herself, she wasn't positive. But when the experts pulled her aside and said, you have serious ability, you need to do something with it. That's when she saw other people, and they looked at her, the way she was thinking, the way she was looking at herself in certain ways. And it only takes one little thing, as we know ourselves, one little thing, and it can be a snowball effect. So again, going back to 2020, even the top athlete or the top performer, that layoff, and I heard it said today, and it's so true, that all that time that you have to spend on your own, that's tough.
Yeah.
Even if you're a high achiever, it's like, well, high achiever usually have routines. So it's like they get up in the morning, they do certain things, and that leads them to doing what they need to do for the day, to train or to prepare or whatever. And then they perform at the weekend. And that's usually it. And because they're the best, they're in more demand, they're paid more money. But that means they have no or little time on their own. And so with that, 2020 comes and they're challenged between their ears. But there's always something in there that's going to be a little bit quirky or a little bit something. So we look at Michael Jackson, he never had that time until perhaps later on when other musicians were more popular and people were looking at him in different angles from different ways of life. And that's where, mental health issues can creep in, even to the greatest people, the most successful people in the world. So it's like a fine line. It's like a thread between genius and insanity, isn't it? So it's like trying to balance on that tightrope all the time and trying to get the most out of yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And that is such a fine line between genius and absolutely insanity, isn't it? Um, one of the things that I talk about a lot, and I want to get your take on, is trusting the process. And I think you've already alluded to it. Like, if you've done the work, you can expect X. But if you haven't done the work, to expect X is insanity, right? How do you teach people to trust the process? I mean, for salespeople, for business owners, they go, well, I need to make more sales. Well, okay, and how are you going to do that? Well, and they might rattle off a few things. Bottom line is, they have to trust the process. If you make X amount of sales and you know your numbers, you know that you will get X amount of make X amount of calls, you'll make X amount of sales if you
Mm.
know your numbers. But you also have to make the calls to understand what your numbers are so that you can trust that process. How do you tell people to trust the process of getting a higher education or getting better at any skill set? What do you tell them about trusting that process?
Yeah, like so the numbers, like you say, if it's running a race and trying to incrementally break it down, training twice a day for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it takes, the numbers are based off something that's happened beforehand, essentially. The science of 1,000 men running that race, over 40s breaking a mile at a certain distance or whatever. It's the
Right.
same way with music or performance in any other regard, working. We know that if you want to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, yeah, sure, you'll be able to do your job. But if you want to get the promotion, you're going to have to do extra work. So there's going to be numbers, extra hours or extra attention. It's all broken down by numbers, like you say. But if you want to be the very, very best, you go beyond those numbers and you look at, well, who is the very best at performing on stage? And then you go, right, it's somebody like Garrett Brooks, for example, but he's not in my genre. I don't have the ability as him. I sing in a different way. Okay, well then I need to look at Garrett Brooks and then slide across and try to find somebody in heavy metal, for example. And that's my genre. So that's beyond the numbers because he's like out of this world. He's got like record amount of people at his concerts back in the 90s or 2000s or whatever. So we look at examples and then we go beyond it, because if we can get like this old phrase of I'll do 110%, like there is no such thing. But if you aim higher than what the science says, well then you probably fall short, because you're a human being and you have things that even I or you or objective experts will miss, or things will happen during a performance that just go wrong, like technical stuff on a stage. A microphone will go in the first second and suddenly you'll have to second guess yourself. It wasn't in preparation. Something always goes wrong. That's just life, isn't it? So we just have to reach higher, know the numbers are there, like you say, know the science is based on a certain amount of attempts at something or a certain amount of practice. And then once you reach that little bit higher, and this is what all the greats do, and then they get away with it sometimes, like Michael Jordan in basketball. Now, anybody will tell you he was a pain in the ass. We saw it on The Last Dance. But at the same time, when he won a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love the conversation, and I definitely want to keep the conversation, have more of this conversation. And I think that um, you know you've got the degrees, you've got the experience, you have all those things, but there's something in the very core of your being that has helped you become the person you are today. Who do you think that is? What do you think that is?
Are we talking in general now?
Yeah, you in general, you as a person.
Or me as a person? Wow, that's a really big question. Um, I think it's a feeling.
Hmm.
I think it's a feeling. And again, if you feel, it's like being helpful as a person, whether you end up a nurse or a doctor or a carer or just a person that is working in an uneducated job, for example, on a toll booth. It doesn't really matter what the job is, but if you know you want to be helpful, you'll be attracted to that job at that point in your life. So yeah, you might be 30 years of age, have no formal education, but you'll see an advertisement for toll booth operator or something like that, minimal training, and you'll go and you'll do it. And the big buzz and that feeling that you have towards that or imagining it is like, I can just envisage myself helping people and saying, good day to you, Bob, and hello, and welcome back, Bob, and so on. And that, you can be very pleasant with people or help people in that way. But in a polar opposite, like lifestyle, or if you had a different upbringing or there was more money about, you could be a neurosurgeon. You could be somebody that really, really helps a lot more people in more deeper ways, perhaps. And I think it's the same way for if you have a drive, like one of these things, like for top performer, is to have a drive. And if you have that like drive of energy within you, and nothing dampens it along your way, and we often hear with a lot of top performers in everything, is they will have adversity. There will be things thrown in their path, and we mightn't see it until later on in years. Like one of the conversations I heard about Michael Jackson by his ex-bodyguard who became his great friend was, Michael actually wanted to be an actor. He didn't want to be the brilliant singer at the height of what he was, the king of pop. His burning desire was to be an actor. So his hope was to kind of get through the music industry. And in the back of his mind, he wanted to then utilize that fame to hope that he would be asked on stage. Imagine, of course, he was going to be asked on stage if people knew about it. So it's interesting, really, but there's a drive there, definitely. If you feel, and that's what I always say to people, if you want to work with me, just reach out. Of course, it depends on your ability and what you're trying to do. But at the same time, if you have a drive, because it's the drive that's going to sustain you. Like, obviously, I don't want somebody that's going to like fail at every hurdle, but there will be hurdles in life, and there will be hurdles in why you want to perform and that. Everybody, I don't believe in mental health as being a bad thing. I believe in mental health as being a term like physical health, right? And if a top performing athlete has gets out of bed one morning to perform in a final or something and suddenly twists an ankle, well, then their physical health isn't the best. They may need to stay on the sideline for that particular day. Other than that, 99% of their health is perfect. They've prepared well. It's just they twist their ankle in that morning. But they're not judged as being like suddenly injured or, out for the season or anything like that. And it's the same way with your mental health. You can have a quirk. Something can happen that morning, or you can get bad news, and it can be a snowball effect. And everybody is kind of open to that, whether you're a top performer or not. So it's like you just need to kind of realize that if you have a drive there, and what is a drive? It's like a propeller that's within you that's going to, no matter what. If you're pushed aside, you might think, oh, I'll never get over this. It's like 2020 again. I'll never get over all these times the money gone or the plans gone or whatever it is. But times change around you. And that's like one thing, like say meditation does, for example, is that meditation, we often think, oh, I meditate because they think it supercharges my brain and does all these great things. And I'll be like 100 times faster and I'll be able to do things better. But it's actually more that you begin to see that other people are reacting differently, and that they become emotional, they become reactive to things when you actually become delayed in certain ways and things. That's where this, in sport especially, you often hear top people saying things slow down. So they have a very acute memory of playing a certain pass or scoring a certain point or goal or whatever, because they're more aware of what they do. And that goes back to practice when they were younger, as well as ability. And so it's, again, that drive. It's like no matter what's in front of you can actually be pushed to the side, even if it's all negative experiences, if you just keep going. So you will find it's like doing your mathematics homework when you're a child. If you're not great at math and you're like, why do I have to do so much? If you do everything and you get it all wrong, you could still like end up doing a little bit of maths, become a maths teacher or a math teacher or something if you love it. That's where the drive is pushing you to do those things. And then you become a great teacher at teaching people all the problems that you found difficulty with doing yourself. So whatever the drive teaches you or pushes you to do, you just have to reach out to people that will help you get there.
The neuroscience has always fascinated me, because there are certain cause and effects, and there are certain things that are going on in our brains that, whether we realize it or not, They're having an effect on our day-to-day actions and our day-to-day results. And as we look at wrapping this part of the conversation up, I really want to get a sense from you on what you think about the neuroscience of what people are experiencing right now versus what they can expect to experience in the future. How do they position themselves for the future, mentally and emotionally?
Yeah. So one of the things with neuroscience is a lot of the guys and girls that study neuroscience, real hard neuroscience people, they will be generally very, I'm a neuroscientist. I don't believe in psychology. And then the psychologists will again, down the hard road of psychology, will say, oh, psychology rules, but neuroscience doesn't.
Right.
But in many ways, for me, it's two sides of the one coin. So like if somebody like a very old, wise person who has gone through, for example, pandemics before, and obviously we don't have many in this world, but if we had, they would be able to kind of say, well, look, I've gone through this before, I lived through it, you need to slow down, you need to be patient and so on. Would listen to them. That's psychologically speaking. But we don't know then, unless we opened up their brain and had a look inside, how much the effect from say 2019 to 2021 has made on a person. But for sure, if we don't, and if we mix the two together, for example, now, if we, in 2020, we lacked organization, one of the things is time. Time is a thing that a lot of people have said, oh, I can't believe, I was working at home, I was working on Zoom, I was generally doing my whatever 40 hours a week or whatever it is, 60 hours a week that you do. But I logged in on my computer or logged in on my PC or whatever, and I did my hours. I did a few in the morning, but I did like loads in the evening or at night when I was watching certain programs or whatever. And that's absolutely fine. The boss was happy. Cool. But in general, the routine is gone because it's time is a different perception. And so with our brains, one of the parts like the frontal cortex of our brains, that's like acutely programmed to look at how we organize things. So if we just take that as an example, the organizational part of things, in a routine 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, 2019, striving, saving money, trying to buy something big like a house or a car or something like that. And so we have a goal and we look at, well, if I earn a certain amount of money and multiply by a certain amount of years, therefore I get that at the end of it. Then 2020 comes and it changes things. And you realize, well, okay, I'm being given less money here, or I need to get the check coming from the government instead here for a few months. And then time changes. Well, then you go, well, I can use my time in a different way. I can go around the house, I can do some cleaning, I can do some DIY or get outside a bit more or whatever. And that's great. But it's really important to keep a routine, because otherwise that part of our brain, that frontal cortex that deals with organization, what we'll find if we all get a vaccine tomorrow morning, we all go back to normal, then we'll all be kind of feeling, well, looking at the clock at 10 past 9, 10 minutes, is that all? Is 10 minutes? So your perception of
Mhm.
time is going to be totally different because your brain has stopped using that. It's like a muscle in that regard. So that part of the frontal cortex, that organizational bit, if we don't use it, what happens to muscles? You lose it. And so in many ways, and this is really, I suppose, very grandiose, but it's brain damage. Over time, if we don't use parts of our brain, we become brain damaged because we lose the ability to move, or we lose the ability to do things or organize, like that part of the brain, the frontal cortex. If we look at older people, for example, that stop moving or in hospitals or get like lots of operations on their lower limbs, their brain then adapts to that and they're like, well, I'm not used to moving at a certain pace, so therefore they don't go up on bicycles or they don't kind of speed in cars because they're not used to moving faster. And so it's the same way our brains need to continue. Our brain is very lively, but the beauty about that is that you can change your thoughts. So again, if you start even right now reorganizing your things and getting to bed on time, getting up on time, doing a certain amount of time of self-improvement, for example, when you go back into the new normal or the normal that was before as much as possible, you'll be way ahead of other people.
Mm, mm. Love that. That's never heard it put that way. That's a great way of thinking. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, powerful. I love, let me bring on, if I know some people might have a question, if you're on Facebook Live or if you're in the Zoom, go ahead and bring yourself on. And if you're on Zoom, go ahead and bring yourself on camera if you want to be on camera. Flo, I know, has always got some great comments and questions. Pearl, so anyone on, go ahead and ask your question or make your comment of what your observation was.
Dr. Hogan, thank you for sharing today.
Hi, Flo.
I was taking information in and taking some notes, but it was interesting how you were saying, you have to get into identify yourself. And how would you recommend, because some people may, I don't know, not even identify themselves correctly. So how do you get clear on being self-identified?
Yeah, it's a really good one. I mean, a lot of the psychologies, for example, we've learned hugely from. But if we look back, a lot of psychologies are actually, and they're huge, great thinkers coming from World War One, World War Two. So a lot of the therapies outside of that come from that era because of the response to the illnesses, the mental illnesses, and the mental problems coming from wars, as we know, like PTSD and so on. So that was then, and this is now. Now, of course, those techniques and those things and that knowledge is fantastic. But we've gone, like, let's not underestimate what has happened here. We're all kind of still in this bubble with regard to the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
But this is going to shape us in many ways as not just a nation, but as a world, and in how we communally think about things. That's on one part. But the other part, like you say, how do you identify that? I mean, if we just take, for example, sexuality, like the neuroscience of sexuality is in its infancy. It's like they're scratching their heads on it. How can they, some people identify as this sexuality today, and then 20 years prior to that, they were a different sexuality. And this is what's coming up in modern life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's absolutely fine. But then that's kind of going to bring in perhaps difficulties into their life or into others around their lives. And so be it. So it's like, what do you want to be? It's like a lot of people kind of, again, we look at performance and trying to do better. There's a natural urge in us as humans to grow, like going back to curiosity. What is curiosity? It's like, I want to know what that is. So tell me or show me. So that's kind of an aspect of growth, isn't it? And so as humans, we want to grow. And if we're talking about identifying or self-identity, then that seems very stuck. Now, of course, there's certain things that can't be changed, like the color of my skin or the size of my body or whatever. But we have all these neuroplastic neurons flying around our brain all of the time. So we can choose, like Bob said earlier on, we can choose the thoughts. Like just because we have all these different thoughts, some of them can be completely erratic and some of them can be completely simple. Like when we're drunk, we're like, did I do that last night? I can't remember. How did I see that video of myself or whatever, right, with a friend or whatever? But you had those thoughts, and you at times you think, "Wow, that was so creative. I put something down on paper, and it was the best. I'm going to become a great songwriter." Then you look at the stuff, and it's absolute garbage from the night before. But that's you gave license to those thoughts when you were inebriated. The next day, when you tried to be kind of completely lucid, or a few days later when you're completely sober, and you rationalize things and you're calm, well, then you can say, "Well, am I good enough to be an athlete, or am I good enough to be a singer, or am I good enough to be?" And you have to rationalize it out, and that's why again you seek the help of an objective other. But the identity, again, what are the stuck things that you can't change within you? Like there are physical things, obviously, but what are the things in your mind that you can't change? You can't change your experiences from your past, but you can learn from them. And learning is curiosity, and that's thought. And again, like Bob said, it's like paying attention to certain thoughts. So how can I build on what I know? And that's growth. And so why can't we identify with something else so long as it goes into our ability area? Now, again, what's ability? I mean, again, if I'm playing sport or performance, I'm only a performer if somebody's looking at me. So I could be in my bedroom with a basketball at 5 foot tall, thinking I can dunk all of the time in the NBA. That's what children do. They imagine. And that's a wonderful thing. Why? Because they're curious. They've seen it on TV. They've seen these superstars and they want to be like them. Somebody somewhere has to kind of stop them and go, hold on, you genetically are not going to be tall enough, or you're not going, So we have to look at our ability. And that's the difference between an adult brain, because the brain then stops at a certain level of growth and it goes, hang on. So you need to then stop your thoughts a little bit and go, hang on, I can improve.
Oh,
We lost them.
he went out.
I see Pearl. Hey, Pearl, bring yourself on. If you're in a place where you can. I know sometimes you're not. Hey,
I
there.
am in a place where I can. Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
This has been amazing, absolutely amazing.
Good.
I'm in the stage in my own life of putting things in order and rationalizing and, sifting and growing in a big growth spurt right now. So having someone intellectualize it and listening to him put it in all these words, I'm writing like crazy.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's recorded so I can go back and reabsorb. But it's just fascinating to listen to this brilliant young man put all of this into words, and and to be in the midst of living it right now. It's a journey, it's all a journey. It's not like you're going to fix it overnight, but it's just been an absolutely fascinating time. Thank you so much, Bob.
Absolutely. What are some of the takeaways that you took, Pearl? And we're waiting for him to come back on. If he doesn't, he'll still be in the group. So.
Okay. Well, just some of these notes that I've got journal entries over the years about organization and chaos, and the fact that he put it in the
Okay, hold on
context.
Hold on one second. I want to bring him back so he can hear your takeaways as well. So he just came back in. Dr. Hogan, there you are. We were here. You're on mute right now, but I was just asking them what their takeaways were. So Pearl has some takeaways that she got from what you were saying.
I was just telling him I'm taking notes like crazy. I'm just absorbing and enjoying so much your wisdom and your delivery. And I love what Bob said about we can feel the core of your being. It's not all intellectual. It's coming from your heart. And I'm taking notes. I can feel it. I can feel it very much.
Yeah. Well, actually, apologies, guys. Just my reception went there. One of the things, for example, in Eastern medicine, and like the history of Eastern medicine is thousands of years old. Like take yoga. Yoga's over 5,000 years old. So we need to learn from that. Look at the amount of people in India, the home of yoga. There's 1.25 billion people there. Billion,
yeah.
That's 1/5 of the world's current population. That's if we don't learn from that, there has to be something there. So I'm a trained yoga teacher. I had my own studio. I went through my ups and downs with it and everything. But there's one wonderful thing in it that and it's towards that Eastern philosophy as such. And this, we've probably heard of the chakras. Like you said just there, Pearl, with regard to kind of like it's in your heart. And then when we look at what Flo asked about the identity, we often kind of get muddled in our mind about what's up here, and we're cognitively thinking about, well, what am I? I'm a nurse, I'm a teacher, I'm a son, I'm a daughter, or whatever. But it's not just that. You can be other things too. You can have abilities. You have to foster your ability. If you still have long arms, you can do things that, long arms can be used for at 60 years of age. So look at your rational abilities and propel them from there and get the people in that will help you. And going back to what you're saying there, or what I was saying there, Pearl, about the chakras are all in these philosophies, they're all joined. They're all kind of like energy spots from your crown of your head, right down your throat, right down to your heart center, and so on. And when you're doing a lot of yoga, for example, it's quite possible to see colors. And all of these chakras then have different colors associated with them. And the colors then can represent how you feel or how you identify with at that present moment in time. So that has been shown and it is proven. I've seen it. I've noticed it within myself at times. And again, once we get to that root cause, that, like you say, that heart, that area of the heart, that's essentially, and then if we think about attraction, and we talked about sexuality, and we talk about love at first sight and these kind of moments, and even prolonged love or boredom in love or whatever it is. It's like feeling, and you often hear this phrase, especially in Hollywood, I'm in love. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. And you're like confused completely, especially as a man. but it's like my mind is telling me one thing, my body is not feeling like it felt before towards that person, or my heart is there, but I'm confused the way they behave in the last while. And again, if we look at mental health, if a person had a mental health issue but is in a relationship for a long time, they're the same person, but then they might, for having decades of mental health issues, something they have not addressed within themselves, might turn around after 30 years of marriage and say, I want a divorce. And you're like, well, why? Because like we've lived with each other, we've had children, been in the same bed. Well, I know your habits and behaviors, but no, that's not what they're thinking behind it all. And so there has to be a movement in thought, like Bob has touched on, which is fantastic. But it's the core of that. What is the core of that thought? Even that thought that we have to get to. And it's like running a business. We look for a niche rather than actually trying to do everything for everybody.
Well said. Pearl, Flo, those of you watching recording, those of you that are on Facebook Live right now, hope you guys are taking notes. Hope you guys took this information. The most important thing, and I know Dr. Hogan will agree, the most important thing isn't that we get the information, it's what we do with the information. So
Absolutely.
I just encourage you guys to take this information and to start applying it now, not tomorrow, not next week, next month, but start applying it now so that it can become part of who you are and how you perform will change based on application of that knowledge immediately. So Dr. Hogan, thank you so much for hopping on and hopefully you can enjoy your family tonight I know what time is it there now?
It's just 7 p.m.
7 p.m. So thanks for taking time out of your evening to be with us.
Right.
And we're going to make you a part of the group, the Facebook group. So look for an invitation. And we've got people in there from all kinds of walks of life that some of the amazing guest of honors that have been on before. So you'll be a part of that, and people can interact with you there. And guys, seek him out, learn about what he's doing. What are some things that you've got? How would you like people to engage with you going forward? Would you like an email, a website? What would you like to do, or how would you like people to engage with you?
Yeah, I think I'm best got it on email. I think that's one thing we've all experienced now with all the social medias and everything, that social medias, they have their own thing. So sometimes you can't just see all the messages coming in. So email is the best. It's stationary and it's there, or as stationary as possible. So I think email is the best. Yeah.
And what's your email?
Dr.Conor. So it's DocConor.com@gmail.com.
Okay.
At the moment, my website is down because my web hoster unfortunately contracted COVID-19. And so he's recovering at the moment. So hopefully it'll be up soon again.
Brutal. Thanks, Flo. Flo, put your email there, and it'll also be in the recording in our Facebook group. So, Dr. Conor, thank you. Dr. Hogan, thank you again so much for being on, and enjoy your family tonight. Guys, get out there, make it a great week, and enjoy your next level.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Bob.